1141. We have an interesting guest here for this show. All of the guests are interesting, but we're going to be doing a couple different things with Desiree Patno. She is the CEO and founder of Women in the Housing and Real Estate Ecosystem. So there you go. And we're going to be talking a little bit about her personal experience, which kind of formed, I believe, this nonprofit organization, for-profit organization. But before we get into that, let me welcome Desiree to Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So let's do the setup by saying, tell me an interesting story, Desiree, of something that's happened to you that kind of positioned you to where you are now for the work that you're focused on doing today.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we formed almost 10 years ago, and a very interesting story is 5 years ago, I had a very traumatic experience with my family. Two of them got very ill. And during that process, if you remember back in January 2013, the banking industry stopped actually giving out copies of your bank statements. And so you had to have electronic versions of it. No longer you had checks. Well, during that process in the first month, a real quick story is that there was a person who actually started taking checks and actually sending them out unsigned. The banking industry actually accepted unsigned checks. And later, lo and behold, we had 140 checks unsigned, 387 forgeries, and initiated credit, which actually gave money to accounts that they shouldn't have, that were all business accounts. So all those small businesses out there and medium size, it doesn't matter if you have $5 to $50 million, they were being impacted. At the end of the day, $550,000 was stolen from me due to the fact that they were unsigned and they processed, and that's where we're at.
So you had an experience where you were a victim of fraud.
Correct.
And through that experience, you have kind of focused now. I mean, you had your organization before that, but you really, let's talk about women in the housing ecosystem and the work that you're doing through that organization. What is that organization?
Well, it really has evolved. Like I said, we're going on our 10-year anniversary, and the organization has evolved through the experiences, whether it be my personal legacy and or other people's issues that they've brought to the table to expand the organization. So the work that we're doing now is really connecting all the different platforms, from sexual trafficking to poverty to homeownership, business owners, all the way up to family offices. So our goal is to give women's economic growth to women's independence. Whether you're a small business and or women-owned business, it's all the same, because at the end of the day, you're a champion that you're sustainable on your own. Okay.
Now, how does the real estate aspect come into this?
So if you think about 2018, we're celebrating our 50 years for HR 5050, which has to deal with 30 years of small businesses ago could not get a business loan if I were a woman without a man's co-signature.
Wow.
50 years ago, the real estate comes into play, is we had the Fair Housing Act, as you know. So those two anniversaries coincide that some of our, if you think the economy is being driven by small businesses, so how does real estate play into it?
Yes.
A lot of it have brick and mortar. No longer. We work out of our homes. So a real estate agent typically works from home because everything's electronic, as you know.
Sure.
We meet you at the property. We send it down. And I've sold 6,000 properties in my career. I've had my license since 1990. And I work with Fortune 100 relocation and deal all the asset management for foreclosures.
So you have a thriving for-profit business as a real estate professional.
Brokerage.
Your brokerage.
Yes.
Okay. And you also, because of your personal experience and those of others, have created this organization that is trying to raise awareness for women's rights and equality? Is that fair?
Not just for awareness, actually advancing
okay.
for all women from poverty to C-suite. So we don't no longer call it C-suite. We call it women's leadership.
Okay.
Because of the changes. So absolutely. So because of the wealth that I was able to grow through my brokerage and businesses, we saw the need that women need to have a seat at the table, in addition to how many women are living in poverty, being single mothers. One of the statistics that really resonates with everyone right now is 30% more women millennials live under the poverty line right now than any generation before them.
Okay, let's back up. 30% of women millennials are
30% more women millennials live under the current poverty line than any generation before them.
So let me say it a different way. There's more women in poverty and the millennials than a cohort before them.
Correct.
That's surprising.
Not good. Well, you have to look at school costs for education.
That's true.
You have to look at, a lot of them are delaying getting marriage,
Yes.
going through it.
Right.
And the costs of supply and demand. You have the pink tax. Anything that you buy that I need to buy that's based for a women's product is more expensive.
Oh, that's the pink tax? Mm-hmm. So we just price things more expensively for women?
So if I need something that you wouldn't use,
Uh-huh.
it gets an elevated price on it.
Okay. So you're very aware of these issues, and you're trying to raise awareness and make a difference for women in this country. Is that fair?
More than just awareness, we're actually changing the impact of it. We actually are supporting the SB 286, which is getting more women on corporate boards, and we're also doing advancement at educational training seminars.
Okay. So why is it, do you think, that there aren't more women in the C-suite or the executive lounge or in corporate boards? And what are you attacking or trying to change so that happens?
If you know it's available, then the women will apply. The problem is that we have more men that connect and say, we're on the golf course, we have an advantage that we're going to talk to. So we're not even known about the opportunities. So our job, as we work with several different agencies to connect the dots and saying, if we have an opening, we want everyone to apply. So whether you're a man or woman, doesn't matter. The best person, or we call it the it factor, should get the job.
You call it the it factor?
The it factor.
What do you mean by the it factor?
So, I mean, you can be a robot, you can be a person, you can be man, woman, you can be of any gender, person of color, doesn't matter.
Okay.
The best it gets the job.
I see. And so there are organizations that are sympathetic and cohorts with you helping.
Yes, absolutely.
Can we talk about any of those here?
Absolutely. We have several organizations that we work with. Empower, which is the Mortgage Bankers Association, has a women's leadership group that works with all the different banking industries. They're phenomenal. They're headed up by the COO of Marcia Davies and CEO. The new president just came on board. They're out of D.C., obviously. Uh-huh. They're so incredible that they monitor 8,000 regulations that deal with the banking industry, okay? Oof. And then we also work with our NDLC Council, which is several other different women that are leaders, like CEO of Tammy Bunnell of Exit Realty. You know, they have 35,000 agents worldwide.
Wow.
I could go down. We have Stacy Walker, which is the community outreach of Freddie Mac. We can go down Fannie Mae. We have Sarah Goldfrank, who does the head of legal counsel for Fannie Mae. And these are incredible women. But as far as organizations, back to your original question,
sure.
We work with Women on Board 2020. The goal is to get 20% of the women on the corporate boards and several other different trade organizations that we work with.
Okay, so over the 10 years that you've been doing this, Desiree, what have you noticed?
Actually, unfortunately, the numbers are going down.
What?
Numbers are going up in some areas and some are going down in other areas. And the reason is that the bandwidth of how many women to get to a certain level of getting out there, retirement, okay? How many positions are coming up for that? In addition to a lot of people don't want to go through the stress and the impact of going through. Even though we have a lot more women that hear about it and want to be part of it,
sure.
The idea is that, do you want to take that on? It takes a very strong woman, and also takes someone who has inner strength and family strength and support systems out there.
Okay. So you brought with you to the studio here a 2018 copy of a Women in the Housing Ecosystem Report, and this is Volume 1, The State of Women's Home Ownership. Tell me a little bit more about this report.
Excellent, thank you. It is the very first report ever being produced or published by Women's Home Ownership.
Okay.
And we started this in 2017, and the purpose is to really highlight, you see a lot of different demographics of the Hispanic, of the Asian, and several other different ethnicities and people of color groups. We never had one for women. And the idea is that we want to focus on how many single women are raising their children, right, that want to buy a home. How many women are mothers. How many are being impacted by living on the street. And so it really focuses not only on the home ownership piece, but the poverty, what it's like to go through a divorce, what it's like to have multiple jobs and take care of daycare and things that go within that.
Sure. And so who gets this report?
The report's available online. You can see it online in the electronic version. The hard copies get sent to all the major corporations, Fortune 100, 500 companies, and then our strategic partners, and then people who would like to pay for them and get them, besides major companies and government employees.
So can I ask, without getting into the details of the report,
sure.
Are there a couple big ideas or lessons or things that the organization learned by conducting this research that you wanted to let people know about here on Critical Mass?
Absolutely. There's 53 resources that are used in this report. And the biggest thing we learned is that the lack of communication between organizations, government entities, and everyone working in a silo was the number one key, is that we didn't know that you had this opportunity. And case in point, we talked about before we went in the air about the Economic Recovery Act, which is the Small Business Administration, about all the natural disasters. $306 billion worth of natural disasters happened last year, and we have over $1 trillion estimated this year. And here we are in the state of California, where our headquarters is, right? And we have all these fires that already surpass any fire breach we've had ever, right? Do you know, if you're a victim of, and you were part of that in any form, that if you're a renter, you get $40,000? If you're a homeowner, you get $200,000. Has nothing to do with you being a small business owner. And you get it for free. No application fee, no processing fee, 1.75% interest, and no payment for the first year. And that $40,000 for a renter can be used for a car, a laptop, a computer, anything you want, a cell phone. And the reason is that could got lost while you had your fire.
Okay. And so this is offered by a government agency?
That's by SBA.
Okay.
But you think of Small Business Administration, you don't think of the Economic Recovery Act monitored by the SBA. And that's what we were called in last year, to facilitate that information and get it out there.
Wow. So I know that many organizations, even 10-year-old organizations that are doing good work, face challenges.
Absolutely.
Do you face any current challenges you want to share with our audience?
Absolutely. It's data overload. You know, even though I recognize as one of the top real estate influencers to follow, our magazine has gotten 4 years running the top publication of excellence award. Can't get any higher than that from Apex. The challenges is limited resources and operating capital to make sure sustainable organization. So the partnership we're very different. We're not just about realtors or business owners or attorneys or escrow companies or insurance or all the different aspects of it.
Right.
We span the entire business arena for women's economic growth and independence. So where do you fit in that niche? So a lot of the work we do is entrepreneurial work and also a nonprofit to give back to the bigger community. So our challenge is it takes more than an initial phone call or conversation to get them to engage.
So you have a national following.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that comes with its own challenge then, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're Southern California based, though.
And we have the office in D.C.
Okay.
I travel a ton.
Yeah.
People see me everywhere speaking in front of. We have diversity and inclusion. We do a very high volume of consulting and impact studies for people. We go and actually put together reports and development to really be in a very niche market. That's very good for us.
Okay. And with a lot of focus on housing and real estate.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what percentage of the people who are in that profession are women? I mean,
well, you got to think of what does housing and real estate ecosystem mean?
Okay.
So in the bigger picture, it's about 60% of all the industries in the United States.
Come on.
You have ditch diggers, you have technology, you have engineers, you have construction, you have all the different back office operations. Okay. So your accountants, your insurance, everything, your economic infrastructure. Every single one of those people that design a road, the impact of the economic forecast of where you're going to go with the structure of the building is all part of the ecosystem.
So you put them into the banks?
Yes, banks, everything.
Savings and loans, credit unions, all that stuff is in there. Okay, so, and you said that's 60% of the economy?
It's 60% of the industries that are in the United States is an estimate. I mean, it's huge.
Right.
So the only people that aren't part of this are going to be your hairdressers, your furniture developers, things like that. That's why when you say ecosystem, you say housing and real estate, you're thinking, well, that's just a realtor or that's a business owner.
And a loan, you to the loan, maybe the builder who built the property, but you're extending it beyond that.
All the engineers, how that overlays into the earth, how that impacts the soil's foundation, how that impacts, whether we're going to have an earthquake, everything that goes involved.
So what's the future for your organization? 10 years in, what do you see?
Another 10 year, well, that's next year, 10 years. 10 years from now or 5 years from now, our future is collaboration and bigger. We already have a global footprint, growing that global footprint. Last year I spoke alongside the United Nations about the very first African countries coming together. We had Panama, Ivory Coast, Uruguay. I could go through the whole list. And I represent the United States to come and talk about the economic challenges of the emerging countries through the footprint for women.
Wow. So maybe I'm wrong. My bias would suggest that women are faring less well in those developing nations than they are in the United States. Was that your experience, or I could be misreading it completely?
There are a lot of similarities.
Okay.
Some areas they're doing exceptionally well, and other areas they're not. So, as a whole, obviously we're doing much better in the United States for the footprint.
Right.
But as a country who's had advancement, some of these countries are doing exceptionally well. But then there's other parts that are really still severely depressed. But the idea is that having that synergy in the same room was powerful.
Okay. So I know that you just had an annual event. What did we miss? What did you just do?
From everyone saying it was the best conference they'd ever gone to in their entire life, even people who had been with major technology. We had Dr. Chintadora, who, oh my gosh, she is 21 years as a former IBM employee. She's an IBM fellow. She's an AI visionary, has over 50 patents to her name right now, saying it was the best she'd ever been to. I mean, what a compliment. We had Rebecca Steele there, who's the lady who was part of the financial crisis that everyone likes to deem. She was the only person indicted for $1 million when the Bank of America came down at the $1.37 billion that was overturned and completely exonerated. To the Tammy Bennells, who's the CEO of Exit Realty, to Sharon Levine, who's the executive director of the FHFA for Omnis. I could go through the list. Marsha Davies had an Empower event, but these women, we had the First Lady of Illinois to come and speak, the governor's wife, about ounce of prevention. So we had, like I said, from sexual trafficking all the way to women home ownership, for women's poverty to women's home ownership, to women's business owners, to CSuite, to family offices. So including the opportunity tax where you can get no capital gains.
All right. So who was there? Who attended?
These were all senior executive women, and also we had, and men. And we also had several government agencies. We had FHFA, FDIC, USDA, CFPB. I could go through the list.
So it was in Chicago, it sounds like.
It was in Greater Chicago at the very place that the only club during the Great Fire in the 1800s survived.
Oh, wow. So there is a building.
There is a building, the Standard Club.
Okay. So, and this is an annual event?
It's an annual event. We'll probably have it on the West Coast this year. Last year was on the East Coast, so this year we're probably bringing it back. It'll probably be in LA. Okay.
And have you done it more than this wasn't the first?
No, this is the first. Well, next year will be 6 years of having the conference because of the scale. It's such a high level conference, and anyone can go. This year we're going to probably scale it to where we have 2 departments. So we'll have the upper echelon, which is the highest level executive leadership, and then we'll do one that's more basic because the level is so high. It's literally people walk out there going, okay, this is a data overload.
Right. Yeah, I'm not ready for all that, right? So if someone wants to learn more about you, Desiree Patno, or your organization, where would you send them online?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm Desiree Patno, and you would go to N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, W for women, R for Robert, B for business.com, for NAWRB.com, or you could go to my personal website, which is for my brokerage for DesireePatno.com. Either one will work.
How do you spell your name?
Desire with another E.
And,
and the last name is Patno, just like it sounds. P as in Peter, A as in Apple, T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, O.
Desiree, this has been fun. Thank you for coming
in,
and I learned a lot about what you're doing, and I'm impressed, and I'm glad that we were able to get you here on Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'd love to come back.
All right. I'd like to also thank our engineer, Paul Roberts, as well as our producers, without whom we couldn't do this show, Joan Park, Crystal Nunley, and Haley Stern. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, let's start there. I am Richard Franzi, Franzi. Until our next show, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.